Yep. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Laura Miller. I'm the Volunteer and Community Engagement Manager for Justine. It's Justine's mission to help transform individual lives and social systems to create a just and equitable community. Our community engagement team is excited to welcome you to the second session of our 2022 Just Conversations series. We envisioned this series last year to engage our community in discussion around important, timely issues that affect us all. Our hope is to keep the sessions more in a conversational format and focused on creating solutions as opposed to just restating problems. Thank you so much for everyone who is joining the conversation. We'd also like to express our gratitude to CUNA Mutual Group for their generous sponsorship of our 2022 Just Conversation series. Some logistical items: we're streaming this live on Justine's Facebook page. If you're joining us from there, welcome. And please feel free to drop some questions in the comments throughout the conversation. And if you're right here with us on Zoom, welcome. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat. And I'll be monitoring both, and we'll try to use the last 15 minutes or so to answer some of the questions that haven't been addressed yet. Tonight, we delve into the wonderful world of meaningful mentorship. We discuss the challenging trends of youth disengagement in our community, the importance of creating strong mentoring relationships for our young people, and what those impactful mentoring relationships might look like. We're delighted to give one of our newer staff members, Jalen Stieber, the spotlight tonight. Jalen is the match specialist for Justine's Mentoring Connections program and the Drive to Succeed program, a collaboration with Operation Fresh Start. Joining Jalen tonight is Jasmine Banks, program coordinator for Operation Fresh Start. We're so excited to welcome Jasmine to share her experiences and insight with us. These are two women in our community who show up for the young people of our community every day in their professional and personal lives. I'm very happy to have you two in conversation tonight. So thank you to everyone for being with us. I'll pass it off to Jalen now to get the conversation started.
All right, thank you, Lara. Appreciate the intro. As she already said, thanks everybody for coming. We're excited to be doing this. I know I'm excited to be talking to Jasmine. Like Lara said, this is going to be a conversation back and forth. I'll ask some questions, kind of give my 2 cents as well, based on what Jasmine's saying and feeling. I just want to start off by, again, so hi, I'm Jalen. I'm from Madison, Wisconsin. I work at Justine. I do the youth programming, but really focus on mentoring connections, as well as our partnership with Operation Fresh Start, which is called Drive to Succeed. So I just want to start off by letting y'all know, to me, so the title of this is Mentorship, a Lost Art, and I believe 100% that it is. I think a lot of people forget that how valuable mentoring can be as far as guidance with life, school, professions, interests, on what have you. For me personally, I think that what is good to focus on tonight is just thinking about how hard it is to engage youth within the community. In particular, you know, Zoom is one of the forms that we use for Drive to Succeed. Sometimes it's hard to get those young people on here, as well as in person. Sometimes it's hard to get them engaged and get them coming. Something else I'd like to highlight with mentorship is just that it's important to remember that it needs to be youth-centered, as well as we need to work on like not trying to fix youth and save youth, more so help guide. Critical mentoring is kind of the definition of that from Tori Whiston Certain. She's an author as well as activist for young people out here. And then additionally too, I think it's important to think about how mentors show up, whether it's professional, informal, and all that good stuff. So Jasmine, I'd like you to go ahead and give a little intro about what you think about mentoring, maybe a little bit about where your mentors came from.
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for inviting me to this conversation. I truly believe it's an important conversation. I hope folks in the audience leave with maybe like a renewed idea, right, of what mentorship is, what it can be, and what it can look like. So I'll just I'll say a couple of things. So I always like to say that my family's been in Madison for 5 generations, from my grandpa to my grandchildren, right? I say that because it's important to let people know that this is why community is so important to me, right? Because my family's been here for so long. My grandmother, so my dad's mother, passed away when she was 32. And it was the community mother. So my grandpa was left with 5 children, right? And it was the community mothers that came to the aid of my grandpa to help him raise his 5 grandchildren. So that in itself is one of the reasons that I believe in mentorship and giving back to the community. What is mentoring? There's not one set definition. Like you can probably look it up in the dictionary, right? To see what the definition of mentoring is. But if that's the box that you keep when you're thinking about mentorship, you're not doing mentorship or yourself justice, right? For the simple fact that mentorship can take on a lot of different forms. My favorite example of folks that mentored me along the way were every year, or so my aunt used to work at the Department of Revenue, right? So every summer when I was a young girl, when I was 16 until I graduated from high school, I would work at the Department of Revenue. The women there mentored me, right? So they mentored me in having lunch with me, or they mentored me to tell me how to conduct myself. I was young. I didn't, you don't know, right? You don't know what you don't know, right? Until somebody's kind enough to think enough of you to kind of tell you, right? So that's a form of mentorship. Mentorship also can be, I'll give the example of, I used to work years and years ago, I used to work at the Madison Community Health Center, which is now Access Community Health Center, right? And there was a program, and it was run by Betty Banks. And so it was a program for families, right? I didn't have my driver's license, and we shared a space, we shared a building. So whenever we didn't have patients, there was a woman that came in, her name was Heidi. So there was a woman that came in, and every Tuesday she would teach the handbook to teach us mothers how to drive, right? How to prepare us to take the written test at the DMV. And so whenever we didn't have patients, I would run over and I would sit there and I would listen to Heidi's lesson. When we had patients, the physician's assistant would come over and say, Jasmine, you got to come back, right? Because we need to have somebody you need to check in. What Heidi did was she took her time, right, to gather these mothers together, to practice with us so we could go through the handbook. She put us all in her station wagon, took us to the DMV. We took our written test, like literally, that's how I got my driver's license. Again, that's a form of mentorship. Without that connection through the Harambe Center with Betty Banks, and then this woman named Heidi that came in order for us young mothers to get our driver's license, I don't think I would have ever had it. So these are some examples of thinking of mentorship outside of the box. It's, to me, a positive engagement. It's putting someone in a position where you think enough of them and yourself, right? To say, you know what, I see that you have a need, so let me help you. Not belittle you, not make you feel like, if I give you this, you have to give me something in return. It's just a positive building relationship. And I'm going to stop because you know me, Jalen, I'll keep going, right? So when I think about mentorship, those are the things that I think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. So for me, like mentors came from coaching, they came from church, they can be supervisors, teachers that I've had within, the past. I think for me personally, coaching was the biggest thing for myself, as well as when I was working for MSCR. I know that a lot of the students would see me and when they got to high school, be like, oh my God, coach, all this and that. I'm like, yes, I know I made an impact. Additionally, like with teachers and stuff, like a lot of the teachers that I felt like I was close with would give me letters of recommendations and all that type of stuff, as well as like be job references. So, I think that for me, mentors are those people that you ever heard of like that superhero that doesn't necessarily wear a cape?
Yes,
Like those were my mentors that I really liked, because they weren't, transactional. Like you said, they weren't expecting anything back. They just, they want to guide and help.
Yep.
So, as I think about that, this is a really good way to go into, who is the right person to mentor, and kind of think about like, what do you think is important for them to like show up when they're mentoring?
Who do I think is the right mentor? Right. The interesting thing is I think we're all right mentors. I always say, so I used to, in a previous life, I used to be the community engagement coordinator, right? And so as I'm engaging with the community, and it was fundraising, that's what I had to do. I always tell people, it's not your money that I want, right? I want your time and I want your talent, right? And the reason why is because two things. People sometimes feel like I have nothing to give, so I'll give money, right? But you do have something to give, your time. I also think that it's interesting. We talk ourselves out of a lot of things. It's so easy to say, I can't possibly be a mentor. I don't have the time. I can't even relate to anybody, right? So whoever it is that you're wanting me to mentor, what do we have in common? And I'll give this story of, we all have something in common, right? How you find that commonality is by having a conversation with somebody, right? Like, I feel like today we do a lot of talking at each other, but we don't do a lot of talking to each other, right? So I'll give the example of when my mother, we needed to find someone to come and sit with her in her house, right? So we reach out to an organization. The young lady comes and sits with my mom, and my mom immediately says, I don't like her. And I'm like, well, you only spent 24 hours with her. She said, we don't have anything in common. And I said, yes, you do. I said, two things I can think of. I said, you both were in the medical field and you're both transplants. You're not from here and she's not from here. Like, these are the kinds of things, right, that you have in common. But again, I think how can I put it? It's just, I wish we would do more talking to each other. And not only that, I wish we would, and I need to work on this too, I'm not gonna lie. We need to start listening, right? Because what happens is when you listen, you're able to find those things that you have in common, versus I listen to anticipate what I think you're going to say. So as you're talking to me, I'm already answering the question I think you're going to ask me. So again, as mentors, right? So we can all be mentors. We were all young. I don't know anybody who was born old, right? So we were all born young. We all, so if I'm going to mentor an 18-year-old, once upon a time I was 18. That doesn't go to say that I know what this 18-year-old is going through. What it means is I've been there. I've been there. Maybe I'm not, not in the same shoes, because the only shoes I've ever walked in are my own. So I've never walked in anybody else's shoes. But what I can say is, you know what? Like, I remember when I was 18, and I know it's so different from nowadays, but like, these are some of the things that put me in the position that I'm in today, right? There's so many things. And again, and I think we are our own barrier, both the mentor and the mentee. We are our own barrier. Because again, I think we're coming to a relationship where we both think we have nothing in common, right? Plus, I think nowadays there's such a thing, which is real, as social anxiety. So how I was raised is so different how young people are raised now. But again, we've got to figure out and meet in the middle. And again, I'll keep going, but let me stop. I'll stop there. But, you know, we all are mentors in some shape, form, or fashion. And lastly, I'll say, and then I'm going to stop, because there's something that you can tell someone that they just don't know. Right? Like that's a form of mentorship. Like I always tell my young people, there's two types of people in the world. People that care enough about you to tell you, and people who don't care. People who think enough about you to tell you are mentoring you. Like that's a mentor. Somebody who cares enough about you to tell you when you're doing something that's not right, because for the betterment of you, right? If I show up to work late every day and nobody says anything, well, shame on the people that don't say anything, right? But the person that says to me, you know what, they pull me aside and they say, you know what, Jasmine, just so you know, like we start at 8 o'clock and you've been coming in late every day. And the last thing I want is for you to lose your job because you're coming in late every day. Like that's a mentor.
Great. Thank you. So what I'm kind of hearing you say is like, anybody could be a mentor. They just got to be willing to be molded into the best mentor that they can be. I know something that Tori has said in her training videos is like, in order for youth to be better than us, we have to be at our best in order to advance them, because we always want them to be better, right? The next generation coming in should always be able to take over, right? And I think part of that you have to be respectfully blunt, like peers are great and all, and, the friendship is wonderful. But at the end of the day, like, if I'm just allowing you to mess up, if you will, or not be engaged like you should be, like I'm setting you up for failure. You know what I'm saying? I hear you too, like active listening. That's what we need to do. We can't just assume what's going on. You must meet them halfway, meet them where they're at, matter of fact. Ask them what they need. This is the issue with this engagement with youth. If they don't feel like it's beneficial to themselves, they're not gonna do it. You feel me? You made another point too of like being relatable. Like you might not be there at that moment. You might not be able to fill those shoes because you have your own. But at the end of the day, if you can be relatable and find commonalities, like that's really what's there. I think too, you hit on being our own barriers, right? I believe strongly, like fear is the only thing that stops you from getting to your highest potential. If you let fear take over, then you're not gonna be there. As well as like you got to show up. If you don't make it there, you ain't gonna be there, right? I think lastly too, like this social anxiety is key. Like especially with COVID have hit, like a lot of people are nervous and they want to be safe. So I think it's really important to understand how mentoring can change as the time period changes. I think like we focus a lot on these issues and everything, but I think a solution to mentoring is just these key points: listening, asking questions, being relatable, understanding that if you're willing to be molded, you can be a wonderful mentor. So like I really appreciate those thoughts. Let's shift gears too, since we're on barriers, right? I'm curious on what you think are some barriers to mentoring, specifically for mentors to show up and mentor, maybe mentees be available. So maybe like accessibility, or anything that comes to mind on what you think can be barriers to mentoring.
First of all, I think so two things. So I want to say this before I forget it. Someone once told me, Jasmine, do you know what the golden rule is? And I said, sure, you treat people how you want to be treated, right? And they said, that's no longer. You should be certain. You know what it is, Jay, right? So now you should be treating people like they want to be treated. It's the platinum rule. So we're getting rid of the golden rule of treating people how you want to be treated. And I say that because as somebody who was born in 1968, I promise you, the way that I want to be treated and the way that you want to be treated are totally different because of how we grew up and the age that we grew up in, right? like there's always going to be for me a level of respect, no matter what it is. The bottom line, it's always going to be a level of respect. But again, like you mentioned, meeting young folks where they're at, and not just young, but people, right? So meeting people where they're at, number one. Number two, I think the biggest thing that stands in the way of a mentor is us. Because again, what is mentorship, right? So sometimes I think what happens is people think mentorship is me buying you things, me changing your life, right? So if I can't like, I feel like people think it's materialistic stuff,
Yep.
right? But it's not. It's your time, right? So I'll give the story. My dad worked 2 jobs my whole entire life, right? And so he worked second shift and third shift. Okay. So when I would have things at school functions, my dad would come, and because he had worked all night, he would like fall asleep. And like my classmates would make fun of me. And I was like, well, wait a minute, at least he's here. Like, where's your dad? Right? Because for me as a kid, it wasn't the fact that my dad was falling asleep. It was the fact that he was there. Right? We didn't have a car growing up. My dad rode his bicycle back and forth everywhere he went. And again, it's not the fact that he had to ride a bike or take the bus because we didn't have a car. For me, it meant the world to me that simply he was there. And again, I think as mentors, we confuse that there's like, we have to give each other credit. We're social beings, we're human beings. As human beings, we're social beings, right? To be in a positive space with somebody that you can feel comfortable with, that you feel nurtured by, that you feel, I'm a true believer in a judgment-free zone, right? So if I come to you and maybe, I don't know, I've had on the same clothes for the last 3 days, why is that even a topic of conversation? The clothes I've had on for the last 3 days has nothing to do with who I am as a human being. We need to start connecting as human beings, right? And again, like I mentioned earlier, the only shoes I've ever walked in are my own. But I promise you, every young person that I engage with in my day job, as we're building that relationship, right? I'm not here, they know, I'm not here to tell you what to do. But what I am here to do is have a conversation so the two of us can kind of figure out what to do, right? Because again, what my idea is could be totally different from what their idea is, but it's just that relatability piece. And if we take out everything else, because society has put us all in boxes, right? The one box I'm in is I'm Black, right? Yep. The next box I'm in is I'm a woman, right? The next box I'm in is I'm a teen mother. The next box is like the next box, right? We have to get rid of those boxes and come to me as a person, come to me as a woman, come to me as a human being. And that's the importance of being in a mentoring relationship.
Absolutely. I think too, like, I mean, I'm loving what you're saying. Like, for me, it's like, I agree. Like, my mom used to come to basketball games, but of course, you know, like she was in school and she had to figure out like, how do I support my child? And at the same time, like, still, you know, get my work done, because I can't advocate for her to be doing good in school if I'm not doing good in school. I know that's something my mom always stressed was actions speak louder than words, right? Just in case you didn't hear, actions speak louder than words, right? So like, that's that still showing up, being consistent with these young people. You might have had a bad day, still show up, because they might have had a bad day too. And that is a way to become relatable. Keep it real. You know what I'm saying? So I think too, like this judgment-free idea, like we need to provide a safe space. They are going through so much in the world already, and all this trauma that's being brought up. I know the youth in my program in particular, they have parents who are incarcerated or were at one point, might have passed away in the facility they were at and are now gone. So, just understanding that I'm not paying attention to the aesthetics. I'm not paying attention to anything that's not gonna, make you feel comfortable. I think there is a difference between like making sure they're okay, saying, hey, do you need resources? What do you need from me? That's that listening and paying attention that hits that connecting as human beings. I love how you say get out of the box, right? I think there's this thing where people don't like to be uncomfortable. We must be comfortable with being uncomfortable. We can only excel, right? If we reach new levels we ain't been to quite yet. You feel me? So I think too, like not wearing a certain hat, just because you're a mentor doesn't make you like the authority. Like you're not telling somebody what to do. Like I think being a teacher is valuable, but like teaching skills, not like pop quizzes and trying to make sure that folks are like following X, Y, and Z. Like if someone's 5 minutes late to a meeting with you, like that's okay. So I really appreciate, some of these comments that you've been making. I think too, like another thing just to pay attention to is accessibility. Like materials are not important, but just making sure that we allow them the resources that they need. So we can't expect young people to get on Zoom if they don't have Zoom. Can't expect people to get to work on time if they don't have a way to get there. So I think that's why it's really, really important to be meeting people where they're at in order to make sure that we really providing them with the space that they need. So thinking about that, I would love to go into what are some of the benefits of having a mentor? What are some of like the highlights to being in this process, whether it's, from mentee point of view, maybe it's from mentor point of view, maybe it's from organization point of view. You know what I'm saying? Because we both work at different agencies that are doing great work. So what do you think, Jasmine? What are the benefits? What are the highlights?
I think for me, right, is pouring into folks the same way that folks poured into me. Right. Like, I think that's key. I think that's huge. I think I always tell my young people, we were given two hands for a reason. One hand to hold the person who's mentoring us, right? Or pulling us, taking us along, and then to reach back and get somebody else, right? So my community has given me their hand. That's how I got to where I am today, right? Which is doing community work because somebody gave me their hand, and it wasn't just one person, right? And so now it's my responsibility. It's not a calling. It's not my passion. It's not just a job. It's my responsibility.
Right.
We can sit here and say we want our community to be X, Y, and Z, but if we're not doing it, who's gonna do it? Right. And again, it's just the little things. Like when you talked about Jalen, you said, if you're having a bad day, just show up. We as adults have to stop letting young people think that we are not people.
Yep. Exactly.
How come I can't tell a young person that I had a bad day? Right? I'll give the example. So when we first got on Zoom in the beginning of this pandemic, this isn't like, nobody wants to be here. Like, I want to be sitting on a stage with you, right? I want to be in front of folks. I want to feel that human connection because that's what we need. But being able to say to my young people after we had been on Zoom for 2 hours to say, you know what, you guys, like, I don't want to be here either. And let's have a conversation about it. Like, how do you feel about it? Because again, sometimes we put ourselves in a position where, especially as adults, we're the authority. We're the expert. Well, look, I'm not an expert in anything, if you want to know the truth about it, right? And why do I enjoy working with young people? because I need to learn from young folks, right? Because if we think that it's a one-way street, we're fooling ourselves. We're missing out on a lot, right? And so, and two, I think it's interesting, like mentorship feels good because it feeds your soul, right? It's one of those things that, don't get me wrong, there's days where I'm just exhausted at work, you know, but being around young people and being put in a position where they feel comfortable enough, right? Because that's, again, what mentorship is. It's building that relationship. It's a judgment-free zone. And again, we're talking about young people, old people, it doesn't matter. But I think just, we have to get out of our own way. And I think with young people, we have to. So when I interview young people in my day job, one of the questions is, in this program, we're going to get you out of your comfort zone. Are you willing to get out of your comfort zone? And of course, nobody says, I've never heard anybody tell me no. Like, nobody has said no to me, right? Because they're in the interview. And then I say, well, what does it look like when you get out of your comfort zone? And then we start to have a conversation, right? Because how I perceive your actions might be completely different from what they're meant to be, right? So if I ask you to do something and you turn around or turn away, you know what I'm thinking, as a grown up to a kid, I'm thinking, well, see, they don't want to be bothered. So why am I going to pour into them? Well, come to find out, well, maybe they just don't know what to do and they don't know how to ask. And then I'm going to give you a story and then I'm going to stop, right? So again, in a previous job, working with folks, this young lady comes into our organization. It's her and her mother. So, she's a teenager and she's got that teenage kind of, like attitude, right? And so she comes in with her mother. Her mother and I have a conversation. They come back for another appointment. So where my office is, it's accessible to this young lady because her mother is now in an appointment with someone else. So here comes this snippy young teenage girl, and she comes into my office and she says, when is my mother going to be done? I said, well, I don't know. I said, but let me go find out and I'll come back to you and let you know, right? So I come back to her and I tell her, I said, well, your mom's going to be about another 30 minutes, but you're more than welcome to sit here, in my office. And so she sits in my office and I tell her, I said, you know what? I said, I actually really love your scarf. She's wearing a really pretty scarf. We start to have a conversation, right? And as we're having this conversation, I'm starting to get to know a little bit about this young lady. It wasn't that she was a snippy young girl, but she had experienced the death of her three older brothers to gun violence. The scarf around her neck was her brother's scarf. That was the last thing that she had from him. And here I thought that she was just a snippy kid. But we took the time, right? Because one thing that I don't do, and I try really hard not to do, is project out loud. So on the inside, I'm thinking, here we go, right? Here comes this snippy little, fancy pants. Well, come to find out, the experience that this young lady had gone through put her in this position, right? So again, I think we need to relate to each other as human beings. As hard as it is, take assumption out of when you meet someone. Because assumption, well, we all know what that means, right? And not only that, what's going to happen is we're going to miss out. We miss out on connecting with human beings because of things that we can control.
Yeah, I hear you for sure, like loud and clear. I mean, it's crazy. Like just to think about, I mean, I love the projecting out loud thing, because I think that that's really important. People don't think about like verbal cues, nonverbal cues, like it can really make or break that trust right there. And it can be, you could say something to me, but I can also look at your body. Like, are you slouched back? Are you, head that, like, are you up in my face? Are you engaged? Like, you know what I'm saying? So I think that really means a lot. I think too, like, we talk about not making assumptions, but we have to be realistic with ourselves. Like, it's gonna happen. We just need to be self-aware. We need to check ourselves and make sure that we come back to the center of where this is. I think too, like on that bit of like being realistic, a lot of young folks and adults be forgetting that like you can't shelter us from what's going on. If we really like you and care about you, maybe if we don't, we're gonna notice if you're having a bad day. We're gonna notice if you just not feeling it. So you might as well just be honest and have a conversation. That is how you become more relatable. I think at the end of the day, we can't expect stuff from you if we're not going to do it. I always think about it like this: if I'm not going to get my hands dirty, why would I expect you to do it? Right.
That's right. That's right.
Like for sure. I think too, like it's like a respect thing. So for me personally, as one of those young adults, right, there's this ideology that we're supposed to respect our elders right off the bat. So like, I'm supposed to respect you from the moment I meet you. I think there are certain situations where that does come into play. But at the end of the day, I think also I expect you to earn it too. You don't understand what I've been through. You don't know, like with this scarf situation, like you got to listen to cues and pay attention to that, because it's the little things that really matter. The big things are great and all, but when you pay attention, like, oh, you really like my uncle right here, right? You really like that because for me, it's eternal life. Like I love that. You feel what I'm saying? So like for her, it was that scarf was for her siblings. So I think that that's really important too. Another thing I want to hit on too is like you said, the two hands. I kind of think about the 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? That goes back to that ideology of like, you have to be an active listener. I got 1 mouth, but 2 ears. So I got to hear you from both. I can't just always be ready to say what's next. So like, I really appreciate some of those thoughts that you have said. I know that we're kind of getting close to time. So I'm going to ask one more question that has came to mind while thinking about this. So Lara and I think about training when it comes to mentoring, right? So what would you say, if any, what has worked really well with trainings, right? And what has not worked so well, as well as I'd also be interested to hear, like, what are some key things you think are necessary when doing trainings with these mentors? We're talking with kids who are predominantly students of color at my job. I'm sure you can relate to that. Think about Madison as a whole. Like, there's a lot of these kids going through these traumas and all that good stuff, right? That are predominantly folks of color, Black and brown kids. So what training do you think is necessary to get mentors on board in the right way? What has really worked well in training that you've seen, and what has not worked really well with mentorship training?
Okay. So a couple things. So first of all, I want to go back to when you said about earning respect, right? So, and I think we've talked about this before, Jalen. I think we might differ a little bit, right? So I always say that you don't have to earn my respect. I'm going to automatically give it to you. I want you to automatically give yours to me too. You can take it away, but I don't know you. When we first meet, I don't know you. So why would I think that you're going to do anything but respect me? And I think, like, when we were kids growing up, when people said you have to earn my respect, that's a lot of work. Right? Because first of all, how do I even know what to do to earn your respect? Because you haven't told me. The only thing you told me was earn my respect. But I don't even know what that means. Because to me, how I respect my friends might be totally different than how you want me to respect you. And then I'm respecting you in the same way that I respect my friends. And now you're telling me that that's not the way to go. Right? So I think for me, we automatically give each other respect treat each other in a respectful way. You can take it away, but you don't have to earn mine, right? I think with training, especially with organizations, there's going to be, each organization is going to be different when it comes to how folks train their mentors, right? I think young people should be at the table when trainings are being put in place. Whoever it is that you are finding mentors for, they should be sitting at the table. Because they're the expert, right? Because again, as a 53-year-old woman, what I think that a mentor should be, or who they should be, or what they should go through, like an 18-year-old might not think the same thing.
Absolutely.
So I think it's important to have the folks that you're looking for mentors for be a part of something when their voice needs to be heard.
Yep.
Okay. Number two, I think it's important to have the mentors as a part of building up that curriculum for that training. I think we have to, again, it was interesting when you said, like, the majority of folks that we work with are students of color, right?
Mhm.
And we have to be aware of, again, it boils down to how we engage with each other, right? I think what works well is not a lot of like reading and pamphlets and all these things. It's like, but being in dialogue. And asking, like, what are you bringing to the table? And then talking through that, because truthfully, when somebody says to you, what are you bringing to the table? The things that you say are usually not the things that we want.
Mm-hmm.
It's always the things that you don't know that you're bringing to the table that we want. And you don't even know you have them until we start having a conversation with you about, like, why are you here? Why do you want to mentor? Why do you want to mentor at this organization versus that organization, right? But again, I think it's those things that people think that they don't actually have, that those are like the golden nuggets.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I hear that for sure. I just a couple thoughts going through my mind listening to you is just like finding that common ground is key. Like that's the active listening, that's like being consistent. Like you said, it's the things we don't know about that are the most, like, those are like the gems. Those are the diamonds in the rough that I really want, right? I think that's a part of it, like, you know, making sure that you're being real, right? That's how you figure that stuff out, because oftentimes we come with this expectation of what mentoring is, what it is to be a mentee. And like, I think it sometimes can be different depending on who you ask. You know, I appreciate we're not going back and forth, right? You think that you need respect off the bat. I think you need to earn it. But here we are finding common ground where we can agree to disagree and still function just fine. I really want to, you know, home on the fact that, like, critical mentoring is key to mentoring young folks. They must be present. Their voice must be elevated. If we do not ask them what they need and what they think is necessary to interact with them, there's no way to be successful. I think that goes the same for adults as well, but especially crucial for young folks who still have time to find themselves and still have time to, like, make a change in the world. Especially a lot of the folks that we're dealing with have all this trauma, might have some sketchy background stuff, maybe not. Maybe they're, you know, good and feeling good. I think too, like, mentors being present, or at least getting input on what is important. I know with Drive to Succeed, it is really important that those mentors come to the planning sessions, so that way we can, you know, one, not dictate what you're doing, because if you don't want to do it, you're not going to do it, right? And also just keeping in mind, like, what people's comfort level is at is really important. So I think having these mentors present is really key to the whole experience. So as we're kind of coming down to the final minutes of this conversation, I mean, I could we could probably go for hours, right? So I really appreciate the dialogue we've had back and forth. Maybe we can do a part 2, I don't know. But I'd really like to hear if there's any last comments that you have to bring to this conversation. I think I'm at my piece, and then we will transition back to Lara to close us out.
Right. So, okay. So first of all, again, I want to say thank you to everybody who has come into this space to hear this conversation, because it's an important conversation. It's one that's not going to stop here. I think that this is just the beginning of this conversation, or at least it truly should be. I think in this community, there's a lot that we have to give to each other, right? I always tell my young people, it's interesting. So when we do our interviews, and you can kind of tell when people are nervous, right? And I said, you know, the interesting thing is, I'm nervous too, because I don't know you. I'm getting to know you just like you're getting to know me. Like, I'm not greater than thou, right? Because I need to let my young people know I'm human. I get nervous. I'm a human being just like you are. And I think that this community, when it comes to the folks in this community, we have a lot to give, right? We're all in this pandemic together. We're all tired of it. We're all exhausted, but we have each other. And I feel like that's the missing piece, right? For a long time, we were all in our houses. We couldn't get out, but we have to remember that we have each other. And I think that's the most important thing. And for me, I would much rather that somebody try than not talk about the things that they can't do or they don't have, right? Because like I started with, the story that I started with, it wasn't that my dad fell asleep at my events. The most important thing was he was there.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that we undervalue the importance of simply being there. And so that's my, we need to put more value on being there.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I think that is really key. That is really, really key. All right, Lara, you wanna close us out? Because me and Jasmine, we keep on going. Go ahead and cut us out.
Well, we can transition to some questions. Thank you so much, Jalen and Jasmine, for sharing so openly and conversationally. I love it. We have a couple of people here who have some comments, questions, and we'll start with Peter. First of all, Peter, thank you for doing what you do. You're working at One City Schools and the Dane County's Restorative Justice Program. And you, among a lot of organizations in the county, have recognized that there is a huge need for mentoring and not enough mentors to be found. But I am, and you're interested in finding mentoring resources. I'm going to just drop a link. We are partners with United Madison, and they've been doing over the past year a huge push for getting information about mentoring in our communities out there. And so that is a really great website with all of the different mentoring programs that that are happening in Dane County, or in Madison, actually, because it's United Madison. We are on there. Drive to Succeed is on there. So that might be one place for you to go. And do you want to, wait, I missed it. Peter, do you want to share any more about what you're looking for?
Let me give you an example. So yesterday, there was a circle, peacemaking circle with us. What restorative justice seeks to do is that 17 to 24-year-olds who are given tickets for various antisocial behaviors are offered the opportunity of, instead of paying the ticket, of going through restorative justice. And what we're seeking to do in that program is to provide a non-punitive way of still having consequences in a psychological sense of a sense of consequences, but in a constructive sense. So the kid yesterday that we had was adopted, and apparently he has no real relationship of support with his adopted mother, who's now moved to Florida. And has gotten a woman pregnant, who has a daughter. And so the world's crashing in on him, and he stole money from Hy-Vee to get diapers and whatever else he needed. And so we were seeking to inculcate him the importance of staying out of the criminal justice system, especially for a kid who's Black. Now, fortunately, in this case, one of the peacemakers was Corby White from 100 Black Men. So we were able to directly plug him in to a mentoring situation, so he'd have that constant voice with him, that there is support for him, and where he's otherwise headed is not going to be a world that he wants to get into. But I don't really know that much. I don't have the sense that 100 Black Men's resources are infinite. So the more we can find other mentoring programs.
Yeah.
And similarly, I'm also talking to the program is that we have limits to what we can do. So if a kid has just gone south one time, restorative justice can work. But if his whole life is crashing down on him, an hour intervention is not going to be what he needs or she needs.
Yeah.
So
Jasmine and Jalen, it might be interesting. We've touched on and mentioned Drive to Succeed, but I'm wondering if you all want to talk a little more about that that program and what we're doing with it.
Jasmine, do you want me to take that one and then
Absolutely.
hit any missing pieces?
Yep.
So Drive to Succeed is a program that is offered through Operation Fresh Starts as a way for young adults 17 to 21 to work on getting a high school diploma, work towards getting their permit, and then also, permit to drive.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. And then additionally provide a mentoring session via Zoom. So we meet every 2 weeks, Monday right now, and invite the young people to hop on. We switch the curriculum a little bit where we provide them, materials to create skills and whatnot. But also we now are going to be helping them prep for that permit test. Our hopes are that when they are done with Drive to Succeed, they will be funneled into the Drive program. Jasmine, you can kind of talk about that a little bit. But yeah, so essentially it's a program for young folks to have mentoring sessions on top of working with Erica Bowie to get their high school diploma, as well as Jasmine got me on, getting a driver's license. I always think about permit first because you can't get a license without a permit. But
That's right. That's right.
So that's a little bit about Drive to Succeed. Jasmine, feel free to fill them in on what I missed.
Absolutely. So Peter, like Jalen said, it's a program for young folks that are justice involved, ages 17 to 21. There's 3 different components to the program. So it's a partnership between Justine and Operation Fresh Start. There's a mentorship component. There's a high school diploma or equivalency component. So the young person does not have their high school diploma. We'll assist them with finding a organization in the community that will best assist them with getting that. And then also they are enrolled into my driver's license program. So the driver's license program at Operation Fresh Start is a free program, and it's a driver's license attainment program. It'll take a minimum of 4 months for a young person to get their driver's license through our program. But like I tell young people, I didn't go through driver's ed to get my driver's license. I just got my permit and took my test. And it wasn't until I started this program, the driver's license program in 2019, that I realized I had been driving wrong all along. So the reason why the benefit to coming into our program, not only because it's free, but also because you're going to be a responsible driver. You're going to learn the rules of the road. And then also we have different folks that come in and have conversations with our young people. So we have like American Family come in to talk about car insurance 101 because it's a state law, right?
And this kid also needed a driver's license too, and I was trying to see if I could help him. So it's great to know about this program, which I didn't know about before.
Yeah, yeah. And like Linda just mentioned, that driver's ed is not offered in the Madison school districts anymore.
Well, this
And
kid is
then-
18, so he doesn't need a driver's ed, but he does need to learn how to drive, he said. He doesn't know
Okay.
how.
Okay.
The one other thing too to remember, we typically, and I'm sure we can see about a case by case basis, but typically this young person is usually justice involved. They don't have a high school diploma and they are working for their driver's license. So if they're not, if those criteria aren't being met, it might be a conversation to have with Erica Bowie. We can get you her contact information as well. When you contact me, we can go from there, but just also keep that in mind as well. There are slight requirements to be in this program.
And
The other
then
thing-
two, oh, go ahead, Peter. I'm
The
sorry.
other thing that was important to me, though, I didn't know how to raise it in the context of the peacemaking circle, is he has one, I'm assuming this unplanned child, and I really worry about how much he knows and how much he can understand the need to, because when my son was 16, I took him to Walgreens and I said, here's where you get the prophylactics, don't ever without it. And I said, give all the horror stories. He, of course, ignored me and got into trouble. So, but I think there's also a need about birth control in this element too. I don't know how to do it, but somehow I think it's, if he has another kid, he'll never get out
Sure.
of this
Well,
morass.
If I could also say, Peter, the Urban League has a fatherhood program that I would strongly encourage. Either you connect this young person to, I would encourage you to do it. And the reason why is because I believe in a warm handoff. So if you reach out to Leotha Stanley at the
Mhm.
Urban League,
I know Leotha, yeah.
yep, he has a fatherhood program. The importance of the fatherhood program, because you said the young person's 16, right?
18.
18. So the importance, right? So first of all, why is it that we don't congratulate the young person who's getting ready to have this beautiful baby? It's always like, oh God, like you're not ready. And then he's bringing all that while he's bringing his baby into the world, right? So we need to start telling young people, regardless if the baby's planned or not, congratulations, because the baby's coming.
Well, the baby's
Right?
here. He has a baby.
So the baby's here. So we have to wrap our mind, our arms around these folks, right? Because what happens is whatever people are giving me, I'm living with that energy. So this young man would, in my opinion, would benefit from being around fathers. Because it's interesting, I had a conversation with a public health nurse, and she said, Jasmine, she said, she said, whenever we go into the home, and even this is a married couple going to the doctor with their baby, right? Why is it that the person's always gearing the questions to the mother? How come the dad's not involved in the conversation? The dad gets to like kind of sit over there. Well, that's not fair to the dad. But again, like even these resources that we have in the community, why are the resources always geared for the mother? Well, goodness gracious. When dads are equally as important. And we have to start including dads in these conversations. And so again, I think when young folks are having babies, first of all, babies are blessings. They're not burdens. When young folks are having babies, we need to congratulate them and start building off that relationship.
And at once, Laura, is it right to do one more thing, or is it too tight for time?
Yeah, I'd like to open it to some other questions. We do have more time, but is there anyone else who would like to? All right, go ahead, Peter.
So at one city, Kaleem has so many balls in the air, you can't believe it. And so mentoring, with the complications with all the sex scandals of the Boy Scouts and so forth, became a bridge too far in terms of how to manage that. And I just said, I'm going to do it off the books. So I'm doing it with an 8-year-old boy. And then it turns out when they investigate, there are 10 other people doing it with off the books, so that one city is not legally responsible. But I think they're seeing, I just want to mention to you that they're seeing that there's something that needs to be added to the equation to provide the support systems, to maximize the support systems. So you have all kinds of supports in 10 different directions. And so I suspect that coming down the road, they're going to be interested in linking up, is my best guess, with the support services for mentoring and going down in the future.
Yeah, I think that kind of brings up, as we were planning this conversation, Jalen and Jasmine and I met, and we were really talking about mentorship showing up in different ways. Like our Mentoring Connections program at Justine is very specific as to who it is working with. We put our mentors through a training and background checks and all of that stuff. So there's this formal mentoring programs that you can find, but then there's these people just showing up and doing the informal, being part of kids' lives for the long haul. And I think that is very interesting to me, those differences and how we can kind of capitalize on both and reach the needs of our youth. So thank you for doing that work informally. And thank you also to all of the mentors who go through, the training and become committed mentors in our programs as well. All right, anyone else we have some comments here. But are there any other questions before we kind of wrap up? I see a cutie pie in that picture there.
I was just gonna say, look at the little, speaking of the baby, look at the young lady on the screen.
That's my
actually
grandbaby.
Jasmine's granddaughter.
That's right. That's my grandbaby, Riley.
Oh,
So as I'm waving, that's where I'm waving too.
that's
Now you can say
awesome.
hi. Hi.
Hi, Riley.
Proud of grandma. Awesome.
Yes.
All right. Well, this has been just a lovely conversation. It went very much the way that I was hoping it would, with two very inspiring voices. So thank you again, Jasmine and Jalen, for being with us. And thank you for all of the attendees for being with us and being interested in this conversation. Just a reminder that our Just Conversation series continues on the 4th Wednesday of each month. Different issues are tackled, but it's all in this kind of conversational format. So I really hope that you all find another topic that you're interested in and come join us next month. You can follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, to keep posted on these events and other things happening at Justine. I just want to make sure that I think there's just, yeah, thank yous. So no more questions. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you have a lovely rest of your evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks, y'all, for coming.